Before this video starts, let me show you a few pictures here. Over here are protesters on the streets of Buenos Aires, Argentina. On the right, the protesters' sign reads out, "The debt is with the people," while the writing on this piece of cardboard can be translated to, "No to debt payment." What about this kid holding another protest sign saying, "My future, not mine"? So why are situations like these being heavily witnessed in the country of Argentina for the past few decades? It all leads to the world inflation, which is soaring as the days go by. Argentina is a relatively big country located at the southeastern part of South America, with its citizen being roughly as rich as the average American in 1895. But 100 years later, the average American is at least 3.5 times richer than the average Argentinian, while in 2022, that number had risen close to double digits. With the comparative advantages in agriculture due to a highly fertile land when compared to other countries, and was once the world's top 10 wealthiest country back in 1913, mainly due to agriculture and meat exports in conjunction with plenty of Western countries investing into Argentina. Fast forward to the year 2022, the country is now desperate for financial aid, and where its government was receiving major backlash from its citizens after being given refinancing of a $44 billion USD loan by the IMF since 2018. If you want to know what the IMF does and how they control the world through various economical policies, there is a video link down below that will get you up and running. Without further ado, this is a video of how Argentina, a once economical powerhouse, has fallen from grace.
You are now watching the White Obsidian Channel.
Before we unpack everything, let's introduce Simon Kuznets, an American economist who was born in Belarus and even has a university named after him. He was also the winner of the 1971 Nobel Prize in Economics. He famously stated that there were 4 types of economies in the world: developed, undeveloped, Japan, and Argentina. The latter is perhaps the most puzzling inclusion on the list. After the end of the Argentina Civil War that lasted almost 40 years, from 1814 to 1853, Argentina agriculture has slowly shifted from livestock, mainly cattle, to crops. Although agriculture in the country wasn't as intensive as in North America, but lands were abundant. Same goes to fertile lands. With the widespread of wheat and corn, Argentina will eventually dominate the world stage as a major wheat and corn exporter for many decades to come. The year is 1895. The economy of Argentina is booming like crazy. As the country received many inflows of foreign investment from the United States and European Union, agriculture efficiencies and production rate had also skyrocketed due to modern commercial farming techniques. This growth was further accelerated with many of European immigration coming into Argentina to set up their new life. This was fantastic for the average Argentinian, as the unemployment rate was well under control and the GDP per capita rose from 35% of the United States to 80% in 1905, just under 2 decades, which is just a few mere percentages lower to that of France, Germany, and Canada. During the golden age of the country, slightly over 70% of the world trade in corn originated in Argentina, even outranking the United States 40-1 as a corn exporting country. Although only being the president of just 2 years, Carlos Pellegrini's presidential contribution had led Argentina's GDP, having an annual average growth of 7.7% for up to 10 years until 1913. While population had doubled to 7.5 million during the same period, where almost half of this increase was due to immigration, mainly from Europe. You see, having many inflows of money into a country could be a good thing or a bad thing. Good being more economical growth, low unemployment rate, greater number of exports compared to imports, etc. And the latter being, well, corruption. Politicians and many business owners took advantage of Argentina's economic miracle with the act of corruption on their mind. Although the nation is growing rapidly, the wealth distribution of this growth was widely uneven, where most of it primarily went to the mentioned European immigrants. Usually, this wouldn't cause any problem since people at the bottom of the wealth pyramid are still enjoying their life as living standards improve alongside the before-mentioned economic miracle. In conjunction to the phrase, "nothing lasts forever," this also applies to Argentina's rapid development as a nation. While corruption is brewing in the countries among the top elites, the odds of having the First World War is just around the corner. Argentina, like many other countries, entered into a recession following the beginning of the First World War as international flows of goods, capital, and labor greatly declined. Foreign investment in Argentina came to a complete standstill from which it never fully recovered. Although Argentina did not participate in the war by staying relatively neutral, this doesn't mean that the country did not get caught in the fallout created by the First World War. Due to large influx of immigrants coming from Europe during the previous decade, the countries of these immigrants were having one of the bloodiest wars with each other. This creates some sort of hostility for them as they live closely to each other as a community on Argentina's soil. In addition to that, most of the investors who pumped large amounts of capital into Argentina while buying up all of their exports are now broke after the Great War. This creates a stagflation phenomenon in the country, which is the situation where inflation rate is high, the economic growth rate slows down, and unemployment remains steadily high. As the in-house politician came under fire for their poor leadership and their wealth being stripped away, they needed a quick solution, and indeed they found one not long after, which is by creating lots of trade deals with many European nations, with the hope of making Argentina economically strong like its previous decade. Sadly, these trade deals were very one-sided. Instead of aiding the citizens of the nation by pumping in capital towards their main industries, the mentioned trade deals only solved the problem of corrupt politicians not being wealthy. Some examples of the trade deals include giving away your primary industry to a foreign power. And it was never a wise solution, but Argentina was desperate for a stimulus in economic growth, and corrupt politicians were also desperate for money to fund their lavish lifestyles. As more trade deals were made, the decline of the nation accelerated further. This creates the rise of civil unrest alongside an unaccountable amount of political frauds. People of Argentina soon forcefully removed their own government, and this definitely didn't make any good impression in the international stages, which resulted in many European investors to further detach from the Argentina's market, and foreign investments eventually dried up not long after. This was a huge problem for the nation, as they have been trying to industrialize other sectors of the economy to compensate to the meat sector that was slowly falling into the hands of international companies. By the year 1950, Argentina's GDP per capita fell to less than half of that of the United States from its original 80% GDP per capita in 1905. After wrapping up the chaos done by the Second World War, foreign investors soon found out their assets were stolen due to corruption, and they were not happy about it. To plug the hole of foreign investments leaving the country, Argentina went so far to welcome the German Nazis who were defeated in the war to invest in their country with open arms. And for this reason, nobody wanted to invest in Argentina or buy any of their stuff, and this was a major blow to the economy. To add insult to injury, Various military and political coups also happened between 1955 to 1983. The military party took over the country for as long as 25 years, imposing more than 14 dictators under the title president. In other words, one new president for every 1.7 years on average, with many and yet different secret solutions to fix the country's economy, which were introduced with each newly elected president, and hence Argentina was doomed both economically and socially. The real devastation that fellow Argentinians had to face was from 1975 to 1990. During this period, inflation accelerated sharply, reaching an average of more than 300% year-on-year, increasing prices 20 billion folds. This is what a typical Argentinian had to go through, especially when inflation was at its peak of 5,000% for a brief period of time. Decades long of corrupt politicians, overspending to build industries, and important industries falling into the hands of international powers, and of course a series of dictatorships really shaped the country from bad to worse. From the 10th wealthiest country in the world, with a large landmass and fertile land, Argentina is now placed at 62nd, even falling behind countries such as Iran, which constantly have civil war, as well as Greece, a country that had multiple bailouts by the EU and IMF, with the latest one being in 2015. Although wealth and debt doesn't really have a direct correlation, but comparing it to Greece and Iran, it gives you an idea how bad Argentina's economy was during those times. After being stagnant in economic growth for almost a whole century, Argentina is still facing unprecedented economical scrutiny. As of the 21st century, Argentina inflation rate varies from 20% to 60%. As of the time this video was made, the inflation rate was at 70%. Factors such as global pandemic, supply chain issues, and a war that is going on in Europe really drive up the numbers for inflation. All of these had contributed to the fact that the country had requested for a bailout of around $44 billion by the IMF back in March of 2020, when Argentina was at the verge of accepting Bitcoin as an alternative form of payment due to the collapse of the Argentine peso currency. The bailout was finally approved when Argentina had agreed not to use Bitcoin as any form of payment in its economy, especially since the IMF is not a fan of cryptocurrencies at all. To be fair, although Argentina had faced and is still currently facing many difficulties, who knows if the country might eventually reclaim its throne as one of the wealthiest nations once again. Based on the current situation, a dream like that is still pretty far-fetched. Only time will tell whether future Argentinian leaders can make the country prosper again, just like what happened over a century ago.